So this addendum to our presentation provides a bit more information for cruisers traveling south of the border, safety issues, navigation tools, weather, trips ashore, and also guidebooks. Almost every discussion that we have with stateside friends begins with the question, are you concerned about your safety down there? To which we answer, of course, but we employ an elevated awareness just like we do when traveling in parts of the U.S. We carry automobile insurance from a Mexican-based company, only travel during daylight hours, and remain on the established tourist routes. As a bonus, the fees paid at toll booths on the divided highway provide access to emergency roadside assistance. We pay close attention to the speed signs, which are posted in kilometers per hour, because many tourists that are stopped are often alleged to be speeding. We are guests in a foreign country and try to behave better than we might at home, and we respect the Mexican authorities, figuring that potential misunderstandings and hassles can be avoided as long as we don't act arrogant or indignant. You know, we've been traveling in northern Mexico for more than 50 years, and we have never once had a bad experience. I imagine there are a number of bad cops out there who make a side business out of collecting mordida from speeding tourists, but personally, we've not encountered them. Usually, just being friendly and respectful goes a long way. So some gas station attendants are more than willing to take advantage of you if you let your guard down. We mention it here because we've been scammed a few times ourselves in years past. We now usually gas up at the same familiar station each time and pay close attention to what's going on. We typically use a dedicated credit card with 0 foreign transaction fees and email notifications of any international charges. We recommend that you pay with pesos at the toll booth or be willing to accept a really lousy exchange rate. Once you get away from the border, local tiendas and street vendors usually only accept pesos. Restaurants typically bring a portable card reader to your table at the end of a meal. We put the exact meal expenses in pesos, not dollars, on the card and leave a cash tip or propina efectiva of 10 to 15% in pesos for the service staff on the table. ATMs are probably the best approach for getting a good exchange rate. Our credit union plastic provides us with one that's close to the official rate, less a 1% ATM fee. Violence from narcotic trafficking in Mexico is on everyone's radar. Usually it's directed towards other gang members, but innocent gringos can and sometimes do get involved. Stay on established tourist routes, don't explore off the beaten path, and heed warnings from local friends. Expats from the States and Canada who own homes or boats in San Carlos maintain that their town is sort of a neutral zone when it comes to violence among drug gangs, but violence does happen there occasionally. We have never witnessed it on our trips, though, and none of our circle of resident expat friends or cruisers has experienced any firsthand violence either. It is relatively rare and shouldn't be a reason not to visit.
I'd like to expand a bit on our navigation approach. We have a below-decks autopilot that serves as a third crew member for long crossings. We've integrated it with a helm-mounted Garmin GPS for point-to-point navigation and route following. However, our main navigation and mapping software is OpenCPN. We usually keep copies running on 2 independent systems, a GPS-enabled laptop at the nav station, and a portable Android tablet. OpenCPN is a free, open-source software package with plugins for displaying GRIB, wind and weather files from NOAA, AIS from other ships, and radar overlays. Its most valuable feature is the ability to show your waypoints, position, and route directly on a full-color Google Earth image at high spatial resolution. With georeferenced satellite imagery, OpenCPN avoids accuracy issues that plague systems using century-old U.S. government charts. Here's a screenshot of OpenCPN running at our nav station. It shows our tracks and anchorages around a volcanic island just northeast of Loreto during a couple of successive seasons. Notice that OpenCPN shows your current position and keeps track of where you've been. It guides you through tricky passages between shoals and reveals shallow water features, beaches, buildings, and vegetation that might not be obvious on traditional charts. The colors and symbols are very customizable. Switching between scales can be done in an instant, and waypoints can be transferred into OpenCPN from other sources. We've used this software now for about 8 years and are convinced it beats the proprietary and expensive systems hand down. It is very competent for long crossings as well as close-in navigation required while guncoaling. We use it to monitor how we swing on our anchor in response to wind shifts at night. OpenCPN is free and very well documented. There are numerous instructional videos available on YouTube. You still should always have paper navigation charts for backup purposes, but we rarely refer to them unless we are entering a formal Mexican harbor. Unfortunately, weather in the Sea of Cortez is not available on your ship's VHF radio. Wind, waves, and precipitation can vary widely in a short distance and often bear little resemblance to regional predictions. In past years, we tuned our shortwave radio receiver to reports that were skillfully assembled by weather gurus Don Anderson and Gary Ritchie. Both these guys knew the sea well and what boaters needed to make a passage comfortable. Sadly, both of those weathermen are no longer with us. However, reliable synoptic forecasts are now available via the internet. So every time we have access to Wi-Fi in a marina or sail past a cell tower, we download the latest NOAA experimental offshore marine text forecast and also the GRIB data files. Reports from these sources help us pick reasonable weather conditions for long crossings and shorter trips between anchorages. Weather relays from amateur radio nets are a good backup when we aren't in range of a cell tower. The Sonrisa, Chubasco, and southbound nets can be heard on an inexpensive shortwave receiver. Their weather is usually just a repeat of the NOAA forecasts, but they sometimes provide current conditions from ships underway or those at anchor, which we also find helpful. Commercial weather forecasts are available on a subscription basis to provide more localized information. The animated graphics provided with these forecasts are really impressive, but remember, they don't come with 100% accuracy guarantee for the exact spot where you're located. A general rule of thumb is to expect winds and seas to pick up in the afternoon. Always be prepared for an unexpected and sometimes abrupt change in wind, especially at night when you can't see it coming and half the crew might be asleep and not available for quick sail adjustments. Before you venture offshore, I might mention a bit more about the winds. This slide shows wind roses from Jerry Cunningham's observations and reveals that during the cooler months, winds come from the northwest about 36% of the time, while 9% of the time they blow from the southeast. Like clockwork, from late April through October, the pattern shifts 180 degrees, such that most winds, 32%, come from the southeast and 22% blow from the northwest. Cruisers like us take advantage of this trend and usually head south in the winter and north in mid-spring. We have observed that once a wind pattern sets in, it often persists for 3 to 5 days at a time before it lets up enough for a comfortable crossing. When the winds do pipe up to 20 knots or more, sea conditions are confused, with waves that seem to come from several different directions at once, and with intervals between crests as short as 4 seconds. The official season for hurricanes in Mexico starts the 1st of June and lasts until 1 November. Insurance companies typically double the required deductibles for losses incurred during named storms, so the majority of seasonal cruisers store their boats on the hard during the summer and early fall. Because of the steering wind patterns, hurricanes generally don't track north into the sea until late August. Several severe storms have hit as far north as Santa Rosalia and San Carlos in October, causing losses to boats at anchor and in marinas. And they have tumbled boats off stands while in dry storage, causing considerable damage. Hurricanes are not the only severe weather events that occur in the sea. Summer thunderstorms or chubascos can produce strong winds in excess of 50 knots. Very local wind events like Clarham Wells in the La Paz area or Elefantes, Bahia de Los Angeles, are difficult to predict and almost never show up in the forecasts. They can make nights at anchor downright unpleasant. Go to any cruising website and you'll likely find dozens of gadgets to clutter your already cramped living spaces. These are a few that we have found indispensable. An infrared thermometer gives instant feedback on whether your stuffing box, engine cooling system, or refrigerator is developing problems. Or it might tell you when the sea is warm enough to take a bath. A rangefinder, preferably one with an illuminated screen, can tell you if you're getting too close to shore when the wind changes in the middle of the night. It can also help you maintain a respectful distance from neighbors when anchoring. Teresa's favorite is a SodaStream device. By making carbonated water and flavored drinks, it cuts down on the number of canned beverages that need to be hauled aboard and reduces the overall bottle and can trash. Finding a boat on the internet, moving it to Mexico, and eventually getting it in the water is a topic requiring far more attention than we can address here. Suffice to say, it's always more involved than originally envisioned. There's a lot of help from brokers and marinas, of course, but it doesn't happen overnight. To fulfill our retirement vision of part-time cruising, we needed a boat that was larger and more capable than our swing keel Catalina. In our case, searching for that perfect boat took us to several West Coast all-sail boat shows, and then eventually from Washington State to Ohio and then Florida. And in 2005, after 14 months of searching, we found a somewhat neglected and basic caliber in Annapolis, Maryland. Over the next 2 to 3 months, she was given major upgrades to her 12-volt system, an autopilot, fresh plumbing, and even a new mast. We christened her Poshteca, which is a Mexican simplification of the Nahuatl name referring to a class of traders at the time of the ruler Montezuma. Much revered among Aztec society, the Poshtecatl traveled widely in Central America and as far north as today's New Mexico and Arizona. They brought treasures, feathers, and exotic spices back to the nobility. We finished our upgrades in early December, and literally as the snow began to fly and ice started to form on Weems Creek, Maryland, we motored her to an Annapolis travel lift and contracted with a trucking company to transport our new yacht. As Pushteka was making her journey across the country, I flew back to Phoenix, and a week later joined the newly arrived boat at the Marco Crane Yard in Tucson. I nervously watched them transfer Pushteka to boat stands. A shiny Marina San Carlos tractor, a Brownell hydraulic trailer, and a Mexican driver took over from there. At the last minute, I was informed that the Marina insurance wouldn't cover us until we crossed the border. So I followed her south as far as the Mariposa crossing, figuring that if anything went awry, at least I would be a first-hand witness. The final 300 miles to the work yard in San Carlos went without a hitch. Wow, all this was so new to me. Trucking your dream across the country in the winter is not an experience for the faint.
So once you've made it to San Carlos, there are lots of things to do. There are many restaurants in the town that cater to everyone's taste, from formal dinners to street tacos. As of late September 2020, many are reopening at reduced capacity due to the coronavirus pandemic that's pretty much affecting everyone. Beach access is possible during the daylight hours with social distancing, but alcohol is still not allowed on the beaches. And recreational boating, as well as commercial dive and fishing trips, are now permitted again. There's also hiking to palm-studded canyon oases, biking on desert trails, and kayaking in the estuaries and along the beaches. We like listening to the local beach musicians and participating in the many local festivals that they have. To get an idea of the local events that are available, be sure to check out the What's Up San Carlos website and sign up for their. So beyond San Carlos, there are also lots of excursions that you can do. We've discovered that any sailboat, no matter how big or comfortable, eventually becomes too small. You don't need to stay on the boat 100% of the time, though. So we take time to enjoy some of the land experiences. Reasonably close to San Carlos, there are several destinations that are well worth your time. Alamos is a Sonoran town that's about 100 miles away, offering insight into Mexican colonial life 100 years ago. Taking your car much farther south than Guaymas does require a special permit, though. So we saw this unique place via a bus tour with a local San Carlos group. A bit farther away in the neighboring state of Chihuahua, the world-famous Copper Canyon can be accessed on a spectacular train trip that goes through 90 tunnels and into forested mountains to Creel at 8,000 feet elevation. It's definitely a must-see. Keep in mind that narco-trafficking is a way of life in these more remote areas, though. Tourists are very rarely a target, but local knowledge is essential. So it's best to stay on the beaten path and engage a guided trip, which can be arranged in San Carlos or many other places.
The Baja Peninsula offers some pretty exotic land excursions as well. When you're in Santa Rosalia, you'll find that it's a great jumping off point for close-ups with gray whales and their calves on the Pacific side of the peninsula. Or you can schedule trips by mule deep into the Sierra de San Francisco to see gigantic pictographs painted by prehistoric Baja native peoples. To relieve cabin fever while in La Paz, we sometimes just rent a car and go for a drive around the peninsula. We've taken trips south along the coast to Los Boreales, San Jose del Cabo, Cabo San Lucas, and Santo Tomas. We've also driven as far north as Loreto. We've discovered that commercial flights from La Paz are remarkably inexpensive. So several times we've flown to the Mexican mainland to spend a week in Guadalajara or Ciudad de Mexico. This year we had reservations in March for a week in Merida on the Yucatan Peninsula, but that wasn't to be, and we've rescheduled our trip for later.
And one final reminder before we go, please be sure to look at our handout, Resources for Cruising a Desert Sea, that is part of this presentation, should be an attachment. We've included some additional information on cruising guidebooks, a link to activities and restaurants in San Carlos, information on Sonora, and some more. So finally, we hope to see more club members soon in some of our favorite anchorages down there. Hope you've enjoyed our presentation and you're inspired to check out San Carlos and see what the rest of Mexico has to offer.